Hey guys, it's Fifflaren, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.
By the way, the obvious other angle, this is why I'm actually shocked, but it makes more sense if just someone in the org basically hated you, like all the management, and they wanted you out anyway. Because the other angle to me that I never understood was this. Dude, even when like people were like, they should replace Fifflaren, I never imagined you were getting kicked from the org. I assumed they'd make you like the coach or something. It seemed like the most obvious move of all time. Like, by the way, if people don't know, I've even heard in the French scene when they actually had to like sometimes kick people like existence, they even supposedly were like, we'd just take him as a coach if we wanted. He just didn't want to be like it. Like, it just seems like a slam dunk, like for what you do in the team, that you should have been a coach, if not the coach, right? Wouldn't that have been a good pivot too?
Absolutely, right. Same thing. They had Pete at the time. I never even got asked to do that. The blow to me, and I obviously looking back, I declined it so quick. They wanted me to stay in the org to go and attend sponsorship stuff like shootouts,
like show matches and stuff, right? I see.
Yeah, they're like, we would still love to have you here. Like, this is what we're thinking, and they're like, you can go to attend shootouts every 2 weeks.
Did that feel like a slap in the face, though?
Oh, for sure. I was like, same thing. The ego comes in a little bit of, who do you think? Like,
right?
Like, I don't need you guys to that extent where you're offering me like basically no pay and to go and attend shootouts. Like, no, thank you. And to your point, right, Duncan? Like, you could argue that should have happened with every single player we had, right? Like, I don't think Faber got asked to do, like, probably maybe as a streamer. I don't think Exist got it. Like, Get Right, for me, naturally being the face of the org at that time, we were a Counter-Strike org. He's looking to potentially retire. Like, give him like a like a GM role. Like, let him be the face of the Counter-Strike team or whatever, right? Like, none of that, right? And it's like, it's such a miss. And again, it goes back to like, I think they haven't necessarily thought about how much the players make the brand, right? Like, it's not sports here. You're not just following LA Lakers for LA Lakers. Like, you're following Vitality for Saiwu. You're following it's a little bit different now, obviously, with all these like international lineups or whatever, but I do think it is a little bit more like community driven, like player focused, of like, if you sign this player, you're getting fans. If that player leaves, you don't have those fans anymore, unless you're actually doing a really good job in growing up the org to stand up to that. But a lot of orgs don't do that. They sign the star player, that's where they spend the money on, and then he's then now the face of the org for X amount of years or whatever, all the sponsors and stuff, and then he's just fucking gone. And there's nothing that comes out of it. I think massive mistake across the board, yeah.
Right, yes,
you said that. Coach? Would I have entertained Coach if I got the offer? I don't know. Same thing, right? At that time, like the way that I was treated and stuff like that, like I think it would have come back to depending on how the outcome would have been. If I actually felt like I had a proper sit down, and like, again, it was a big surprise to me, right? The fact that I got kicked the way I got kicked. Like in most cases, maybe it would have been like, hey, Robin, like, or like, hey, team, like, this team is not performing the way we need it to be. Like, we need you guys to step up. Like, we're going to have to make changes soon. Like, fucking say something, right? Like, lead up to it. It's not just like, don't come in as like this massive blow in the surprise. I actually feel like, looking back, would I have accepted it even if they had offered it to me with that? Probably not, because of the animosity that I held towards the org. But that's why I made Dignitas, right? Or that's why basically that came to be. It was like, let's bring back the group, right, that we felt got wronged. And I felt like I would have rather given that to someone else than not do it through an IP, right? And with what we did, it was like 5 years, like a little bit too late, I'd say.
Oh, sure. By the way, we can obviously jump around. Let's jump to that period. Let's talk about the Dignitas project. So if people don't know, I actually can vividly remember it was when I was in America because we were doing all the initial talks. In fact, if people don't know, I wasn't initially hired to Flashpoint. What they did is they hired me and Monty to be consultants and come in. And the joke was, we really were just consultants, by the way. Like, they had like a whole, like Mick from fucking Face It had like a whole like PowerPoint presentation. And the joke is, because you have to understand, I have a flair for the dramatic, right? We basically came in and it was like a scene out of a movie, like fucking Entourage or something like. We came in and basically I was like Jeremy Piven. I sort of just went like, this is all shit. In fact, all this Counter-Strike shit, and like even what he had, like he was just about like boot his and I was like, whatever that format is, they fucking suck. Leagues suck. And then like basically because we just sort of like shocked all these big owners who are millionaires, like then they were like, oh my God. So anyway, the point is, when we were there doing this thing, while I was there just for the few weeks to do this thing, and I was also doing, I think, something with Monty and like League of Legends or something, I remember talking to you because obviously everyone was around the project and you were there from Twitch or whatever, and you would just told us, yeah, like I'm going to bring like basically the old NIP lineup back. I'm not playing, but it's going to be them four, and they're just going to play for Dignitas. Like, and this is actually, by the way, months before they even officially left. And it was done. So, and I can't lie, when I first heard it, it was just like, In 2020, you're bringing them back. Like,
Yeah.
look, I get the idea. You run back that, 2 years later, you do like a last dance. Like, this is like 6 years later, mate. Like, when you say that, here's the problem, right? The problem is this, Fifflaren, because they never got to play a LAN, and it was just online tournaments, and then the project ended essentially, and you weren't involved anymore. It's easy to laugh now and go, it never could have worked, but we also never got to. The worst part about that project is we never got to see it fail. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like that. I don't know about you, Fifflaren, but in life, if I give someone my best try and then I fail, I might not like failing, but I can be at peace with it, if you know what I mean. Like, I can be like, that's okay. I accept the result. But if I actually, like, tried my best and then I didn't even get my chance, I probably would be quite bitter, or would always wonder, what if like I'd had 6 months of LANs, or we'd had a chance to, what if Hallzerk had gone on LAN and developed. The worst part about that project is, as much as we all laughed out, the what if is crazy on that one, right? You'll never get to know.
Yeah, it was literally, that team was formed. We fly over to the US for Flashpoint. We play one game offline,
yes, one.
Right? And then the pandemic breaks.
Yep.
And that one game, we looked pretty good. And then we played the same team twice after that, but it was online and we lose.
Yes.
And that was the big premise of, like, built to your point. Like, we built this team of veterans. And same thing, going back and looking back at it, even for me, of like, dude, getting these guys to be zoned in or excited about online matches when they have accomplished everything and won everything, it's like, no, you're getting 70% of what the player is. And then we had obviously the development piece in Hallzerk, and that lineup back in 2020, I had to say, like, when the news came out of like, oh, like they're old and whatever. Again, HLTV rankings is maybe not ideal. The fact that these guys are actually like pushing top 20 almost. In an online environment, being like straight veterans. The one thing, to your point, absolutely, I go back and I say, like, this team would have been much, much better in an offline environment. I also think that was the detriment of this team, and like what ended up happening, because like I think 5 months into that roster, I ending up replacing Get Right and Exist for Hare and Heap. Right, it's like the move that I make, and it comes with the fact of, we have got, like, when I built this team, I came back. I'd been in Twitch for 5 years. Like, for me, it was like, I'm coming back to CS with like a bit of a redemption story. I want to show to people that I can do this, like, be a coach. I've been a player. I've been an analyst. I've been a commentator. Never done the coaching thing. Like, I want to do this proper. And, when we built this team, I was very open with all the players. I said, listen, like, I understand we have history and stuff like that. Like, for me, this is my future, right? Like, I love you guys, but when I'm building this team here, like, I need to make sure that you guys are bought in to the concept of, like, we are here to win. This is not just a payday. We're not just like cashing in. Like, we are actively competing, and we're actively putting down the time and effort to succeed.
By the way, like, that's actually key to say, Fifflaren, because obviously the cynical take most people had was, it's a retirement home / they want Dignitas to pay them all to do a last dance and just for fun. Like, that's cool that you actually would like fully zoned in though. Well,
I'll say this, and I'll give props to Forrest, right? Forrest would have never joined if that wasn't the case.
Right.
That people just think, oh, you want to go back, you want to retire. It was never the case. I think he was in a position where NIP at the time, they were traveling every week. They were never home. I think Patrick was expecting the first kid, or just about to, and he wanted to still compete, but he couldn't be out for 300 days of the year.
Right.
So when we had these conversations with him, it was all about like, well, I'm not leaving to join a team that doesn't want to win. Like they're competitors, like Forrest is a massive competitor. So it was contingent on the fact that Forrest would join us if we are built to win, right? So like a few months later, when you realize that like the team is not functioning the way it is, like we need to get new blood, like we couldn't just run with the old. Like it was that the changes was made to keep making this team more competitive. And here's a little fun snippet as well. Like when we talk about the coaches, so like I had left, Twitch with the intent of like, I actually started missing Counter-Strike more. I started missing the space. I was still in the space at Twitch, but I want to be part of the team again. Like I missed the traveling and the camaraderie. And I came in with the mentality of, well, I want to become like a coach or a GM. It was never an issue for this team that I built. My initial goal that I wanted was that I wanted to join EG to coach their team. This is the Tarek lineup and them. I forget the whole roster, but they have Amapet as the coach at that time. And this is around the time I remember having a conversation with Tarek. Like he's at a point where he's not performing very well. He obviously MVP at the major. He gets a massive slump. And we talk very heavily. And that's how I got interested in coaching to begin with, where it's like the conversation of like, oh, like maybe you guys need someone, like maybe I can come in. That would be super cool. Like I would love to coach a North American team. like at that time, obviously no experience with the differences of like a European team, North American, like how did it work? Super interested in that. That ended up not happening. I think they ended up signing Amapet at that time or keeping him or whatever, I don't know. But then the plan B then was essentially, okay, well, I had another offer to just go and build a North American team. But then I had then this offer that was tied into Flashpoint of a league already. And they're looking for a very good offline team, which is why this team was pitched, right? Because the whole concept was that we were going to play in LA, right, the whole time.
Yes.
And with the roster being built, I actually felt pretty good about it. And then Hallzerk, for me, obviously we see it now in complexity, right? Like definitely a little bit of a hidden gem. Like I had a lot of faith in Hallzerk, very unpolished diamond, like he needed a lot of work. But like long term, I actually had a lot of faith in that team. But yeah, as soon as we hit online, you start realizing all these issues. Hallzerk had visa issues. We couldn't even play Flashpoint with him. We had Guardian, so we had to swap calming in English. Halfway through, we stopped doing that because Guardian's just like, I just understand you guys. Like people right. just weren't used to calling in English, right? Like we've forgot names and the spots and all that. Yeah, and then heading into it, I mean, the goal was always like, well, please, let's go back to offline, and then that took years, right? So, yeah, I think that is always going to be like the what if story. I think if anything, sucks for the Forest and the Get Rights and the Exist and Fabric, where it's like that's kind of their retirement team.
Sort of.
Right, sort of like obviously Exist is coaching, but in terms of competing, and I do think that it's a shame that they didn't get more opportunities, or maybe they didn't want to or whatever. I do think that they deserve better, like get a chance to go out on the high versus like, hey, yeah, you were just part of this like online team for 8 months and then like COVID this, and then we just shut it down. That feels like a little bit of a feels bad moment.
By the way, one thing I always thought was a bit strange, like what's weird is if people don't know, all those memes on the internet about like husbands and wives, where the wives are all like shocked that like husbands, like we don't really just like talk about everything we're thinking about. Like the joke is, when you say to the wife, like, oh yeah, she's having a baby soon, his wife, and then they ask all the questions, when did you? Then you go, I don't know, he just said he's having a baby, and then they go, no, but what's going on? And you go, I don't know, that's all they said, because we just don't. So believe it or not, even though we've had a million conversations and drunks of it, I've actually never asked you this question, which is, in that first year, one of the first things you actually did do after getting kicked was you came with me. You were on the desk. We did MLG. We did all these events together when I was big on the circuit, etc. But then you did just dip and take this Twitch job out of nowhere. Like, if people don't know, you were like very, very well liked among the people who did those events. And as far as I know, you had a very good. That's why your Twitch job was great. You had a great relationship with all the orgs. Like, you could actually, if people don't know, you could have done analysis as long as you wanted. You could be on the broadcast. Was there a reason why you wanted to go and do a different job? Why didn't you want to keep doing analysis?
I just felt like, because even when I was playing in NIP, I was always the interview guy, right? Like at that time I had an English speaking girlfriend, like my English was comfortable, like, hey, just let Robin do it. And I feel like what I ended up doing, my first few events at Talent Work, actually not in the first few, what I realized like doing it more and more was I'm enjoying the camaraderie. I'm enjoying like spending time with people, like, but I'm turning out to like someone that I didn't want to become, where because I'm an in-game leader and I'm very strategical, for me, when I watch moments on the server, I always see the negatives. I don't see a cool clutch of like, oh, what a sick 2v5 clutch. I see it on the losing end where I say how, that should be unlosable like that, like five. And I was looking back, I was actually very negative on the desk and stuff. Like I still had fun with it, like playful and whatever, but rather than now, like when you do listen to it and stuff, it's a lot of excitement. It's not showing off like a lot of weaknesses. It's like highlighting positives and stuff. And because it was getting more and more serious, like I had a full-time job already, like there's a lot of prep coming into it. It's why I ended up just doing these Beyond the Summit events. Like that was the only thing I did for the last like 4 years, I think, because it allowed me to just be myself.
Right.
It allowed me to come in and just watch without feeling like, oh, I need to be a certain way. And because it's a more loose and relaxed atmosphere, like I can get away with being a little bit more of a clown. And the flip side of that was because I had a full-time job and because I was so liked, I actually felt bad to the people that I was taking their jobs from, in a sense of like, they're hiring me because of namesake. They're hiring me because of who I am. But I'm going to come in and I'm going to give them 50%. And really, I'm there to hang out with the boys, right? Or like do whatever, versus allowing someone that is giving it 100%, right, to come in and essentially like do their stuff. I think my last time realizing that, I think it was the Cluj-Napoca event or something.
Oh, okay.
Like if I go back, I was not good at that event at all. Like, you know, the MLG event that we did, Duncan, or like the MLG major we did, like those are highlights for me because I actually feel like I was really like zoned in, like I really cared. But the longer it went, and I had a full-time job at Twitch, I wasn't watching nearly as much. I wasn't nearly as involved. Like I was involved in CS, but just not in the spectator space. I just felt myself also of like not getting irrelevant, but same thing of like, I feel like it's one or the other, you know, like I either jump in here and I start doing that travel and stuff, or I stick with the Twitch side. And because of the way I was, and like Twitch for me was just natural because it's like, it gives me the angle outside of just CS. Let me do something else. Like if people still ask me, I think it went to a point where people tried to sign me up for a whole year and I couldn't do that. Like I didn't want, and then rather than me saying yes to that, I said I can do one-off events. That's around the time where things start changing for casters, right? Where they're like, well, we want to make sure we have the whole year covered. Right. We're going to sign everyone at the same time. So if you can't commit to this event, we're not going to have you do the other events. So that's kind of how it was. Like, I don't think there's any animosity or like the way that I ended with things, or like I still had such a great time on these desks. I can't even remember when the last like official one I did, but like looking back, I did a lot, right? Yeah. Like, it's funny as well. Like you would argue, like, I don't know how many times they tried to ask me to cast the major finals. I always said no, because same thing. My mentality was like, that shouldn't be highlights of me shitting on a player in a major final. Right. Like it should be more hype, right? So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. You know, I've been thinking about this, this interview, Duncan, is the first, I think, video appearance that I've done in probably like 2 years or something. Yeah. And it was because I never wanted to be the face of something. I got pushed into it, right? Like, if anything, Getra wanted to be. He loves to be in front of fans and all that, right? And I just wanted to play the game. And then because I was so outspoken then, former then, in-game leader getting removed, I think that was very natural to throw on the desk. And I think same thing. Maybe if my mentality would have been better, had that been a year after, whatever, maybe I would have just wrote it out and said like, yeah, I'm doing this full time, right? Like, but yeah, you just never know. For me, I just felt like it wasn't something that I felt like I could give it 110%. So like at that point, why even, why do it, right? If you're just gonna half-ass it.
It's interesting you actually yourself have thought back and you noticed that you had like a critical style, maybe sometimes bordering on the negative, because actually that is one thing that shocked me when I worked with you. It's like I actually used to give you mentally props, because I was like, it would be very easy for him to come on the desk and basically just play defense for his career the whole time and basically be, look, but I'll tell you what, I'm friends with him, so he'll know this is what I mean by this. I think that's what Maniac did for the first year or two. He himself had been the guy who was getting wrecked by everyone, including people like me. And so for the first year or two, he'd be the guy who'd always have that reason as to like, when I would do one of my rants, like, why the fuck does Simple have the Deagle and Edward has the AK? He'd be like, yes, but maybe Simple, is trying to empower Edward by giving him the AK, and he'd have some great like defense. But obviously I was just thinking like, aren't you just talking about yourself, really? Sort of like trying to tell yourself it's okay. So I actually wondered in your case, this is why I want to ask you, I sometimes wondered if you intentionally went the other way. Like if part of it was like, I want to show that like I am like someone who knows the game and I've got this knowledge of it. And then also, I mean, some people would say in some ways you sort of take the power back if you're the one who can be critical of people. And you can sort of say, I mean, also, by the way, I wouldn't blame you if you felt like, hey, if I was winning every event and everyone scrutinised me, shouldn't this guy on the 9th best team get scrutinised for throwing this game? Right. Like, isn't that fair? Was any of this bubbling around?
Not really. I think if anything, I wanted people to know that, like, because the way that I was on the desk was how I was on the team too. Right. Like I had my positive, I was goofy and stuff like that, but it came with criticism, right? It came with the fact that we're not perfect. Like when it came to like watching games, like I was one of the few that wanted to VOD review in NIP, like actually look into mistakes. We never needed it technically, right? We never needed it. So I think that I just follow along with the trend. Like if let's say I was on the desk and I was watching our own game, I would have been just as critical of things, because I would have done the same thing to me. Like when I went back and I rewatched the games, I'm not critical when there's like, oh, I should have made that kill or whatever. I'm critical when there's like such a mishap, like how do we lose that 2 versus 4? Like what goes in? I would be super critical of that. And I think that's like the break point, because I think at that time there's still some negativity, but at that time there was only negativity. There was nothing highlighting like good plays. So like I said, I just came in with the fact of like, listen, I know a lot about the game. My biggest pet peeve back then was, and there's nothing, I love these guys, But what I realized was the casters that was casting when we were playing, they were not competitive. Like they
No,
were not
no, of course
professional. They've
not.
never played. And what they were saying and basically educating to the fans were so wrong. So I ended up getting upset because I'm like, these are the guys that's educating the audience on what's happening,
Sure.
and they're saying the complete opposite of what's happening. So when I started doing the analyst work, my mentality was, I got to give it to them straight. I got to give it to like, the reason why this happened was because of X, Y, Z. Yes. Like they made a mistake there. Like I want to educate the fans to a point to which like they actually felt like, oh, like there's stuff that actually I can bring with me and like become better. I remember at that time there were some segments I would have teams message me after and be like, oh, thank you so much for reviewing that, because it was helpful, like to get an outside perspective. We're used to just people saying that the other team was better or whatever, when I was focused on like, yeah, they're good, but like these guys just absolutely, shit the bed, like whatever. No, so I don't think I necessarily had, like you said, I think it would have been very easy for me to just be like, oh no, but he's the support player. Yeah, like, exactly. No, he should be doing that or whatever. And I don't think I actually never ended up doing that too much. If anything, it was like a lot of just expectation setting of like, hey, like certain people on the server, like they have certain jobs or roles, right? Like let's highlight these or like talk about the negatives of like what ended up happening there. But I do think one of the things I didn't do, because I know that I was very negative of like moments on the server, but I was never negative to like a player of like, what? Like this guy is garbage. Like he should not be here. I think the only memorable moment for me that maybe happened a little bit was this Pasha highlight on Dust 2. And he's saving in pit and he's looking radar or whatever, but it's a funny highlight at the time. And he doesn't shoot, right? He ends up like just missing it. And I go like, oh my God, like pull the trigger. Like I thought I was old, right? That was to that extent of like, that's friendly banter, but it wasn't like, oh my God, remove him from the server. So I think there was like a little bit of like, yeah, I was negative, but I wasn't negative enough where I'm like actively shitting on these guys in the sense of like, you got to remove them or whatever. If anything, I was talking negatively about like the teamwork and how the team worked and, what they should be thinking about instead, right? Or like doing a little bit better.
Yes. By the way,
a lot of that came from North American teams, actually. Like I remember doing these Face-It leagues like online and watching North American Counter-Strike for months. And I'm like, my head was just about to explode of like, I can't believe some of these guys are getting paid. Like what in earth? Like what on earth? But that's just the space, like, I guess.
Sure. I know what you mean, by the way, because funnily enough, I have a similar origin story when I got asked to do analysis, which is the thing I was thinking was, oh, I'm going to do it differently than all the things I hate when I watch the broadcast. It's the same thing. If people don't know, my whole style was basically no one ever did anything negative at the time when I came. So my whole shit was like, I've been watching a million of these matches and then you do see someone have a really bad game and fuck up 2 massive clutches. And then they go to the desk and they talk around it. And I'd be like, mate, if I get a chance, that's why I always told pro players, listen, you all had the 10 years where I just asked you for the interview and you had control. I've got the mic now. I'm going to say what I think. So sometimes you're going to like it, sometimes you aren't. And then what I would say is I'll spin it into this question, which is, even for me, I've made it pretty known that I'm like kind of iconoclastic. I'll say what I think and all that. Even for me, I still have those moments where I'm friends with a player. Might even be one I actually talk. I don't tend to make it public. I'm friends with them often, but there might be one that I check in with all the time. I'm asking before the game. Mate, I'll tell you what is really hard, and it will always be hard, is when you have those great convos, and in the convo, when you're a friend, of course you understand how they could win. Of course you know what's going wrong. But then you go on the desk and it comes to that moment, and who do you have winning this one? And I'm sorry, every single time, I've never picked my friend if I didn't think he was going to win. Even if, I've even told this story, in the major that Team Liquid went to the final, I had to pick against Hiko's team almost every time because I didn't think they were the better team. And the bad thing is, I'd be talking about, you could make the final, this is going to be sick. And then I'd go on the desk, they're not going to win this game, like Virtus Pro's just a better team. I'd have to do that. And so what I was going to ask you was this. Dude, it's bad enough for me because I'm just friends with them and you have to go there and have the drink at the bar afterwards, especially, by the way, God forbid if they win the game, they'll never let you hear the end of it. But in your case, you actually, when it was right, you were absolutely, I think you maintained this well. When Envious and Fnatic were better, or TSM eventually, you always picked them against NIP. And people go check the record. Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, one, I'm going to guess the NIP players didn't like that. And two, sometimes Nip would upset, and I tell you what, they used to get mad at me, so I imagine they must have given you some. What was that like? That must have been awkward in a way.
I think it was, but I also think at the same thing, I was never attacking them individually. Like I was attacking NIP for like old school, like I felt like they never renewed themselves, right? Or I felt like they were having issues. And I always felt, because my relationship, like you said, right? Like even with the Hikos of the world, of like it's not such a delicate friendship where I can't do my job. And I think that they also realize that of like, at the end of the day, like, and in most cases, I was speaking the truths, right? I think it would be different if I'm just flat out lying, right? Or like saying something that's not true. I think there's only one moment. I think you and I are both on the desk at a DreamHack event, and Getri's just like, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah, it was,
I think
yes,
after one
true.
of our segments, right? And it's like stuff like that. It's like, dude, that's fun, right? Like, if anything, I love the banter back, technically, right? Like,
it's funny.
So that I always saw it black and white. Like, I didn't care if these were like my close friends or whatever. Like, if they're coming into a game versus then, you know, the current Fnatic or whatever in 2015, and they're just like so much better, dude. Like, who am I to say NIP's winning? Same thing. I'm doing the audience a disservice, and if anything, I'm showing bias where I don't really have to show bias. Like, if I felt that they were going to win, I'm going to say that they're going to win, and people might be like, "Oh, bias" or whatever, but I would be able to explain why I feel like they're going to win.
Yes.
Versus. Same thing. When I betted against them or when I said they're going to lose, I gave a reason why I thought they were going to lose, you know, and a lot of cases it was like, I feel like they haven't reinvented themselves. I feel like they're struggling in certain moments, right? And same thing was never anything with individual players. And if anything, it was a jab at them of like, hey guys, like time to fucking go on the serve and like get some new shit, you know? But I would go, I mean, after all these events I was at, they were competing in, same thing. End of the night, bar, you know, the event's over, we're going to have drinks at the bar, right? So that's kind of how I saw things, and I did it with all the teams, right? Like even the stuff that I was friendly with, like if you know MIBR was playing, and you know I'm close with Taco, like I would say that MIBR is not playing well, right? It's nothing against them, but I'm not there to attack them individually. I think that's the massive difference of like if they saw that I would have done that, I think I would have not made so many friends or like lost friends. But I think when they see the way that I do it, and there's like, you know, with a little bit of a laugh on the side as well, of like, haha, that was kind of silly, you know? A lot of the time, I actually not on all the events that I did, I actually never felt a single time that I had someone get upset at me.
Oh, that's cool.
To that extent. Okay. So that was awesome. And like I said, the only thing that I felt was actually, if anything, bad for myself in the sense of like, man, like I'm being negative, and it was like kind of what I didn't like. Even if it was different, but like rather than doing that, like let's try and highlight positives a little bit more. I still want to see negative. Like I don't want to tune into broadcast nowadays and like not have people point out mistakes. But I think there is like a fine line in like pointing out the mistake, but also highlighting like the nice play that occurred, right? Like at the end of the day, these players that do take the advantage of like a poor play is like, well, they're good enough to take that advantage, right? To make to flip that round on their behalf. So. I mean, I always saw it as like banter, right? Like after the events, if they got thrown out and stuff. And if anything, the difference was that I wanted the players to succeed, but I wanted the org to fail. So it was always like this like bittersweet moment where like, oh, NIP didn't qualify for the major. They lost the Vega squadron. It's like, oh man, that sucks, guys. But it's like, oh, happy that NIP didn't make it, right? So like you always had that too. And I think that the guys knew that as well. Like my relationship with you was very good.
I mean, one thing I would say as well, it's actually a good topic because people don't ever talk about these things. One thing I always think fans get really wrong about is when we do analysis is they really think whatever we say of who's going to win is what we secretly, like a fan, want to be the case. Right? First of all, like I just said with that example, obviously I wanted Hiko's team to win in that case. It's just, I just at the end of the day, when I do my job, which I'm literally paid for, by the way, my job is to say they're not going to win if I actually don't think they will win. It's not about what I want. And so one of the worst ones is like that. It's where like you have to predict what you think, but it's not what you want. And then actually the joke is, I'll give an example. You'll remember this. It was that first DreamHack Malmo where it was the first one that we had Malmo, and NIP famously was actually, at the time, everyone thought they were a bit washed, but they did that crazy run where obviously in the end they won the whole fucking thing over Na'Vi, and I was picking against them all the time. You were even most of the matches. But what's funny is,
think I was too,
even though you also picked against them, here's the difference. Look, obviously I wasn't on NIP, so I have an obvious bias to that one. When I was picking against them, I also did think, well, they've dropped off, so they should lose. And I remember, because obviously you do like them, even though you picked against them, I remember you running in when they were winning, being like, they're winning, Duncan, they're doing it. And I was like, oh, fuck off, like, whatever. Because I also hate being wrong as well. I do hate when the results are. But the joke is, if people don't understand the example, even though you picked because you did think, when they were winning, you were loving it. Obviously, you were in the moment, you were fucking fully enthused, right? And that was an epic event. You remember that one? It was a fucking banger. That Malmo Stadium was dynamite, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was insane, right? Like, and to your point, like you can only feel happiness for the guys standing on it because, like, you know, at the end of the day, especially being a part of the team, right? You know how much time is being put in there. Like, and well, I would even say as well, what people forget is that when we became so big that we became, like, we had buses with that IP on there. We have an IP burger at McDonald's. Like, we were so far ahead of time.
Yes.
Where like, I don't think people realize that like we spent half the weeks doing media and shit.
Sure.
Like, we were doing half the weeks on doing stuff that we didn't want to do because that's just part of being in an org. And I think then seeing that and then seeing all the stressors like leading into the event and stuff like that, I mean, I couldn't feel nothing but happy for the players that ended up, turning it around, especially after everything I saw. And if anything, like obviously home ground and stuff like that, like I do think in the back of my mind, there was always like, oh yeah, here NIP goes again. They're going to live on this for years now, or, Malmö champions or whatever. But yeah, it was always like you said with the Hiko example, right? Of like, yeah, you want them to win, but at the end of the day, if you're just like putting it piece by piece, you're like, oh, here you have a team that is really hot at the moment, that just came off for a win, and here you have a team that just went out in group stage. Oh yeah, I'm gonna bet NIP to win. Like they've been practicing, but like, no, I mean realistically here, like to your point, right? You're hired for something. Yes. I think the only difference is because it's obviously turned into a meme at this point, and like Moses is a patriot of North America. Is
sure, yeah. But he also plays that up as a character, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But I think that's also because like CS is a global game, but North America is not super into it. So like there is the underdog story. Like I'm okay when Moses does it, and I think the storyline is there. But I think like for example for like a Yanko, right? It's like, well, now there's no Serbian team, but let's say every single time G2's playing, it's like he doesn't say anything bad, right? Because Nico's there, and it's like, well, you don't see that either, but you see like there's some people that would do that, right? Of like, oh, my friends are playing, I'm just gonna get them to win. The famous Hadji and Maui clip recently, right? Same thing, right? Of like you have to be able to give the negative.
No, it was Blair. It was Hadji and Blair.
Oh, sorry, and Blair. Yeah. Like you have to be able to like. It can't just be hand holding of like, show, like at the end of the day, I agree. Like we are competitive. And if anything, what I've noticed in North America, especially is you have the people, again, I want a lot of things. So like my mindset is I'm here. If I'm going to put the time into it, I'm going to do well at it, or I'm going to try and win. I'm not here to join a team to half-ass it or whatever, or like, not put my money where my mouth is. But I feel like the hand holding aspect of things have like really like blown out of proportion in the sense of like, oh my God, like, celebrate the fact that I said what like dude, no one celebrated me when I drove my computer for like 5 hours to a stable in Copenhagen, having to compete and sleeping in a barn, right? Like none of that. Like if anything, it's passion for me. I want to do that, right? Like if I go to an event, I don't perform, like that's shit. Like I don't want to do that again. I don't want to go there and be made fun of because I didn't perform. But I understand why they would do that, because expectations were higher. Right. Yeah. No. So I would always like black and white, like the team is better or not. Like, and I think probably that's what made me a relatively good analyst as well. It wasn't just like, oh, Hiko's amazing. Oh, he's going to go and win. And like, oh, whatever. It's like, no, like, listen, like people are going to play bad. Let's educate people on what went bad. It wasn't just like this player was. And I think that's at least what I try to accomplish when I did go in. I'll be like, yeah, we can be negative, but let's be negative with intent of like educating the audience of why it was like, why it's negative. Right.
Yes. By the way, if people don't know, the reason why I haven't taken what would be the low-hanging fruit of going really and have a lot of fun with the whole head-you thing is because unfortunately behind the scenes, I've heard you just had some problems and it wasn't really about that like segment.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I've heard there was just some bullshit. Because obviously the joke is, like, I did sort of think before I knew that, like, look, I'll solve this problem in 5 minutes, love. Just work the next event with me. I think we'll, one segment, that's all it'll take. After that, we'll both be absolutely on the same page and there won't be any problems at all. I think I might, it's rare that this is the case. Some people think I'm the virus. I think I might be the cure to that problem, believe it or not. I think I'll fix that one. Just 10 minutes is all I need, boys. I'll just be in and out. Don't worry about it. Everything will be coup de la after that. Don't worry.
And I'd say this too. I think that's also why, like, I have a lot of positive like experiences and memories working with you, right? And I think the reason for that is because you add in, very similar to how you build a team, right? You add in a guy that's very outspoken, that is gonna, make fun of things and banter and stuff like that. And on the side here, you have me, that if anything, the nervous tick that I have is that I just laugh, right?
True.
So it's just a bunch of moments where Doug just shitting at someone and I'm just sitting there laughing, right? Because I'm like, yeah, that's actually pretty funny. Like if you remove the context of like, he's not the same thing. Duncan is not there to attack an individual. It's like, it's something fun from the server. It's supposed to be a little bit fun in games, right? I think, what is the NBA, like the
inside the NBA,
there's a reason why that is so popular, right? Yes. It's like just people shooting the shit, but still educating the audience on like what's going on, and that by far to me is like the best. Like that's why I love BTS events. It's like it gives you both the best of both worlds.
Yes. By the way, I actually do have a quick question. Obviously, there's not going to be a huge one because people don't care about industry stuff, but I care. So I want to ask, actually, what did you do at Twitch and what was sort of the motivator? Like, as far as I can tell, you were one of those people, I don't know if that term still exists. I don't know if you were like a product manager or a liaison or whatever the fuck, but when people had those roles, the joke is, I actually can sort of, as an outsider, see why you vibed with it, because it basically was actually one of your strengths in life. It was being social. Like, your job actually was sort of for real. It's a dope job if you're a social person, but it wouldn't be the job for me, but for you, I see it's mid. You really, your job was to go and meet people like me, talent, players, people from teams, TOs, game devs, and then you have like dinner with them, drink something, you talk to them, you have social setting, but you also do some business as well. I can see, look, for I can see the appeal. Was it as simple as that? It seems like a great job for you, mate.
I'd say the first year was as simple as that, because this is right. So I joined, I think, a few months after Amazon had acquired Twitch.
Right.
And like a big goal for them was obviously the site's new, like live streaming is new. We just need to educate and get more and more people on board and involved. So my initial job when I first joined Twitch was I was a global head of CSGO partnerships, basically. Like at that time, let's remember, way back, right? Like nobody was streaming. The whole goal was, at that time, the only thing that had happened was Twitch had gotten, I think, a cash injection, and they were doing like these booths at these events, right? To kind of showcase. I'm not sure if you remember that. This is super old school. But then the goal of that after was, well, obviously, as a company or as a platform, we have to grow. We have to get users streaming on a platform. Like we have to create deals with like, an esports org of like, hey, like, does your org want to be sponsored by Twitch? And what does that mean? That means that your players, if they do stream, they should be streaming here, and we should be doing contracts on that. And and a lot of cases, the first year, like you said, was very much travel and a lot of education. Like when people told me this when I was playing, there was no education. They were like, oh, you can make a lot of money. You're like, all you have to do is go live, like blah, blah, blah. And you will go live for an hour. You're like, what's this? Like, there's no money. Like, what are you lying to me, right? And there's this negative side of like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. It's just a waste of time. And I think when I got a chance to enter and I got to see all this and like saw it on a flip side, right? Like the world at that time didn't just revolve on Counter-Strike, right? Even though we're celebrities in our own right? There's so much else. So I think my first year was very much of like be the community figure, like get people like interested and talk to these either if it's game developers, if it's tournament organizers, if it's teams or players, to try to get them interested in that aspect of things. And a lot of that piece was educational. I was only in that role for about a year. A year after I was one of the first few staff that was part of founding Twitch Esports. Which is their separate esports department, which basically before Flashpoint, that league was called ECS, right? And that was my department that built that. Same thing, another product that we built that's still live to this day, RLCS for Psionics for Rocket League. Same thing, that original tournament concept was made by us, by Twitch. Right. And then we gave it back. So like at that time, when we made that department, then it was much more strategical in a sense for esports of like, how do we help brands create esports? How do we get the current brands that's currently in the landscape to be a little bit more financially well off, or like, let's do some stuff that made sense. Like I remember back then, you remember there as well, a concept that they had was, well, rather than doing a deal with, say, a tournament organizer, we would sign the talent instead, because the thinking was, best, the best events would have the best talent, and no matter what, like these talent would be asked. And it gave us that kind of like security in the sense of like, if they're exclusive to Twitch, even if there's a YouTube event, like they're not going to be able to go.
Yeah, if people don't know at the time, it's not the case now, but because at the time there was YouTube was the other rival, that Twitch used to pay a retainer to certain people. They were like people like the biggest, I'd put it sweet, and there's people like that, obvious people that you'd want to have one, just so that, like you say, by the way, I'll even say Twitch was mega cool. Like, if you don't know, if you go back and look, Anders still did do some non-Twitch events, but the point is, they kind of had first refusal. They could kind of say like, well, okay, we'll let you do that one. But the point is, if it was really like a big rival, we could say, well, look, we're paying you this, so don't do it. Like, that was actually a smart angle, I thought,
Yeah, and the whole concept was that we do that around the board, right? So we did that for teams as well, right? And we're saying, hey, you're sponsored on Twitch. If you are going to stream or do stuff, like you're doing it on Twitch. That's obviously since then has developed a lot, right? Now you have non-competes in the sense of like everyone's streaming everywhere. Like there's none of these contracts anymore. But back then, like, it is crazy like how fast time has gone, because like literally I feel like within a year and a half I went from own TV to Justin TV. We were pitched, we had sponsorship, we never streamed, and then I joined and it's Twitch now, and they're doing all these things. They're looking to basically take over and take over the whole entire market, into then basically like, well, we have the experience. It's very difficult. Like people think of like running a tournament is easy, or like setting this up. If you're a game developer, you've never done this before, it's like you don't even know where to start.
Oh,
right?
Sure.
Like people always, and I feel like it's a North American thing, but people, the mentality is always like, as long as we throw money at it, we're gonna make it a tier 1 esport. And it's just like that's not the case. It's like, if anything, you shouldn't do any of that in the beginning, and it should be natural growth.
Yes.
And if you then notice there's something, like support the top end. But here instead the concept was, we are then the department that can flip anything and turn it into esports. Chess.com, for example, their league as well, also Twitch esports. So my last 4 years at Twitch was actually like doing that. It's a lot of back end stuff.
Oh, nice.
I did get the ECS product, so that was me working with Faceit. I'm not sure how many.
Oh, by the way, in the story, that now I understand why Fifflaren was there in that Flashpoint story. Then,
yes,
right? I actually wondered at the time, what the fuck is he doing here? But fair enough, now I get it. Okay, right.
Yeah. So I very much connected into that. The concept of what ECS came to be, and there was rumor back then too as well, right? Of like we wanted it to be twofold. We wanted ESL to be part of it as well.
Yeah.
And basically create. Because at the time, it was funny because all the tournament organizers we went to, even Valve, Valve was probably the only ones, but all these other guys said the only ones that can fix the scheduling problems and all the issues that Counter-Strike are having is Twitch, because Twitch, technically, exclusive, and then they put it on us, and then our concept was, well, if you're putting that on us, let's try and come up with something that benefits everyone, right? And it's always going to be difficult. Like you have two competing parties, they want the full calendar, they want to have as much as possible, right? And then eventually it just ended up being, ESL ended up doing their own thing, and then Faceit obviously still ended up partnering with Twitch, right, to do ECS, and it was that angle. But yeah, I mean, I was working on that product for, even if I was doing other stuff, for a good portion, I think, of like two years or something, when I was at Twitch Esports. Also at Twitch, I helped to facilitate and make Twitch rivals. So there's a lot of like stuff that you still see to this day that I
fingers
think
in these pies, right? I see. Okay.
Yeah, and that was, I think, the beauty of it as well. Of like my biggest goal moving to the States, even the reason why I accepted the job at Twitch to begin with was because I had just come off that event with MLG with you, and they had found out that I'm moving to the States, and they offered me a job.
Nice.
And when that happened, Semler was actually the one who told one of the Twitch executives. You remember Chris?
Yeah.
He was like, oh, Fifflaren's moving to the States and he's going to go work for MLG. And then basically they said, no, he's not. And then,
right.
you know, a month later, you know, they basically, and again, they were made, like, especially back then, the way that Twitch was formed is very new. They needed industry people that was relevant to the space. So obviously for me, when we first announced, Hiko was the North American portion. He was only part-time. I was the first full-time, which was why I was global. And then we had one guy in Europe for that same intent. In Call of Duty, we had Golden Boy, for example, or in Halo, we had Golden Boy. In Hearthstone, we had Frodan. So they built and hired these industry people for each single vertical. But as I mentioned, that was only for like a year. It was a kickoff of like, yeah, we're in expansion mode. Then once that was done, it very much came to be kind of what you see now, where it's a little bit more, it's everything rather than like these small buckets with like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and now it's just like esports or creative and that side. So.
By the way, being as we were talking earlier about like reminiscing on the days doing events, actually let me be self-indulgent for a moment, because I actually feel like you're the perfect person to ask this, since I actually do feel like compared to us nerds, and we are all just like orcs in fucking Lord of the Rings compared to normal humans, like we are all weirdos who just stay indoors. You're like the Daywalker, mate. You have none of our weaknesses and all of our strengths, like fucking Blade or whatever, right? So I feel like you're more socially attuned, so I can ask you this question. What do you think it is? Because you remember what it's like to be in an IP and just see me write stuff on the internet or tweets or video, and then you met me in real life. I mean, when we met that first frag bite, we almost hit it off immediately. We're having great convos.
Yeah.
We're into all stuff. You probably were surprised at like some of the things I was discussing. Right, here's what I would ask you. I know people like Yanko have tried to explain this many times. In fact, Yanko, maybe this is a cheeky analogy, but fair play, I'll give him this one. He makes the analogy, because he knows this will like be one for me too, of like he says I'm like Brazilian fans, which is on the internet you think fucking hell they're all lunatics, but then if you meet him in real life he says they're actually quite nice, and you would think, oh, what was that all about? So essentially here's the question. What do you think, what does someone who hasn't met me not get about me? What do you think doesn't translate? Because I've always thought, by the way, look, I do get that in a way I spice it up a bit online. But I would say, you know this, I would say everything I write in a tweet. The joke is I have said that to Fallen's face.
Yeah.
I've told him, look, mate, I love you, but I think you're fucking overrated as shit. But I can do it in a jokey way, obviously, in real life. What do you think, what doesn't translate? What don't people get? Why do some people, only some, but why do some think I am like a fucking psycho? What do you think? What do you all
Well,
take?
I think my take is this, because we see that as well, even in teams during COVID, which when you put in teams together and all they're doing is meeting each other online, like not only are you not seeing like the facial expressions, you're not seeing like the friendly banter on the side, like the cheeky little smile or whatever, you're seeing just a flat like text that can be misconstrued, right? So same thing on voice comms. If you have a player and he's passionate, he might come across as sounding aggressive, right? But if you then see him in person, you're like, oh, actually, no, like he's just passionate guy. And I think that was what I noticed about you as well. Of like on the internet, you're getting the very like honest, like, oh yeah, I'm going to speak my mind in that sense, even in videos, right? Because it gets cut. You're not keeping in like, you know, the bloopers or whatever. It's really just like to the point. Versus as soon as it's the same with Tommy. As soon as you see him in person and you realize, well, okay, it's a person behind the screen, right? And it's actually someone that wasn't just this super negative or, you know, aggressive guy. If anything, yeah, that's just like the stuff that he throws in on the side. But the stuff that comes across it is like, you always approach me and you're like, hey, you always ask me how's it going, right? Like, you know, like what's going on? Like there was always be stuff around the banter, which made it, you know, for me, it was just like, oh, he's just, you know, shooting the shit.
Nice.
So that's kind of how I would frame things. Of like, I think it's just very difficult. Richard Lewis is the same one, right? Like Richard, but he's a little bit more on the other end where he like argues so much on the internet and everyone just thinks he's a tool, right? But at the end of the day, once you see him, it's like, no, he's actually a very loving guy and just a very sweet guy.
Yes.
I think that doesn't come across a lot on like the internet,
right?
In a lot of ways, especially the kind of content that you end up doing, right? It's like it's very high level. It's very, you know, a lot of info and stuff like that. If you were to do add or banter, like add your own flair to it, we're talking, you know, another hour worth of the video, and you can't do that, right? So, and the most content you do, like the Last Nation, I know you do the one with Monty and Richard Lewis comes in every now and then. Same thing. Now you have 3 that's very identical in the sense, same sense of like, it's not negative, but you guys are very honest. And then when you get thrown into the same room together, now it just seems like, oh, it's just, they're just, you know, everyone's just negative around.
Or whatever.
Yeah. And it's all feeding off each other. And the whole segment just feel like it's negative, but in reality, same thing. You guys are friends from way back when. That's how you communicate. That's how these conversations go. And now the audience gets a chance to be part of that. But that's not to say that that's who you are as a person every single time. You know?
I've had to make a lot of tough choices in my career, but thanks to the support of my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, I never have to make tough financial decisions. So this video and all the rest on my channel are kindly supported by Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Mac Pugnaccio Racula, Animosity, Jensen Gore, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it if you've ever heard before, and you'll hear it many times in the future. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerry Keys Minion. Do you want to ask a question in my video AMA? Do you want to be part of one of those long discussions where we talk about whatever you like in esports? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are going to be? Or maybe you want to suggest a topic for a future Thorin's Thoughts type video? Well, if any of these perks or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is today and join the Skrilluminati by joining the Patreon link in the description box below.